Absolutely. So I like that. I want to go ahead and dig into that more. But I guess before we dig into that more, Shane, in my experience, I think there
Mhm.
is a lot of opportunity to go to that kind of semi-automated stage, but it's a lot of work, right? There's
Mhm.
work up front to understand the problem and to figure out what the human is doing because you're putting, I don't know, maybe at most a cell in place and the cell is doing some of the work as opposed to going and putting in an entire line. So, can you walk us down the path as to how you came and how XYZ has become a group that helps to do some of the semi automated work, please?
Yeah, so like I told you that we took from our experience from a highly automated environment like automotive, and then now we're going to customers now. And sometimes there is this misconception of maybe someone hasn't seen a lot of automation. The first thing they think of is a robot can do that, but not always. So there's actually some applications that are better for humans to do. So that's what we really do when we first start this process of going into looking at, can we take from that manual and go to a maybe a semi-automated. There may be sometimes that it doesn't even make sense whether it's going to be financially, because it could be very expensive to try to go from that, or just may be a better application that's suited for a human to do that. It could be a lot of like variations in the application. It's always changing, it's different. Automation likes something to be repetitive, to be the same, or at least close.
Mhm.
It could be very complex, small part assemblies, things like that, that a human seeing something and looking at it can easily identify that compared to a robotic automation system would have trouble doing that. So we start there and we look at, okay, does this make sense for an automated process? And then if it does look like we can get to there, then we start looking at, like you'd mentioned, the complexity of this. Okay, it sounds easy sometimes to say, okay, well, a person just does this all day. Let's just throw a robot in there. But you
Mhm.
have to look at, like I had mentioned just a minute ago, where automation likes to have something in the same spot every time. So how that process works, the flow, like how the part or whatever it is that the robot we're working with is how that's presented to the robot. So it
Mhm.
has to be in a place that's known, the robot can pick it up. And there's some things in there you can look at. We have some with new technologies coming out. There's some vision, some other things that you can look at that's going to help you get to that. But again, you have to, there's that threshold, right? Of does it make sense from a cost standpoint to try to automate something that maybe you're not going to get that return, right? You're not going to get that return on investment. So we really want to vet that first, look at that complexity. And then so once we decide that, hey, this is going to be a good fit for at least a semi-automated process, we start breaking it down into more of understanding of the actual process itself. Talk to the customer, what's some of the pain points, what some of the issues they're having. It could be
Mhm.
everything from, especially the last couple of years, could be from we just don't have the people, right? We're struggling to have enough people to get the product out the door. So we have to find some way of automating some stuff. It could be ergonomics, it could be, safety issues. Maybe they have a lot of injuries or it's in a bad environment, like I've mentioned. And a lot of times when you're in bad environments like that, your customers tells you that they have a lot of turnover issues. They just can't keep people working in that particular application. So that's another thing we look for is that, okay, this makes sense. Let's try to help automate this. So once we get to that level, we start doing a little deeper dive and trying to really understand the scope. We go through that, and then we really start talking about the specifics of the application, the process. But then we look at the actual manual process and say, okay, this is how we're doing it manually, and that gives a lot of clues on how we're going to be able to semi-automate it. Because a lot of times you can take how it's being done now and easily transition some of that into an automated. So then we look at that. We look at what the requirements are, things like cycle times, how fast the product has to be moved. We look at what the product is that the robot has to work with, right? So there's different weight, size, different things like that. So that will dictate, is this a fit for automation as well? Or what level of automation? We can size robots and different things like that and understand what it's going to take. And then usually during that discovery process, we also talk about any specifications, requirements that the customer has. We will identify drawings, schematics, different things that are going to be required for us to start putting something together. And usually the first thing that we do after we get through that phase of it is and that's really what we call an engineering study. So we really kind of break everything down and look at each component of it. And then from that point, we can start to do some concepts, to get some ideas of how we're going to do that. And we're working with the customer while we're doing that phase of it. And then really the next step after that is once we get to that conceptual idea and have some proof of concept. There's a lot of things you could do to do a proof of concept. There's a lot of software out now you can do virtual. So you show how you would actually do that process and show that it's possible, show that how much time it'll take. You can do real life type demonstrations. We have some robots in our facility that we use for that type of thing. We can actually do a demo with a real robot and kind of show. So once we get through the proof of concept phase and everything's looking good, we obviously we've already what we talked about is the budget there. That's one thing we want to make sure too. But then we will get more into a budgetary proposal and to start talking about what the cost would be to do something like that.